So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. We've a very nice session lined up for you now with two speakers, one of whom will be joining us online. So the first speaker is CK Gunsalus, otherwise known as Tina Gunsalus, but publishes under CK. She's from the University of Illinois, Urbana campaign, and is going to talk to us about research environments, institutional integrity, and the public. And just to mention that Tina was also a research integrity officer for 10 years at the very beginning of that sort of process in the US. So, Tina, if you would mind.
Good afternoon. And let's see, we have to start the technology here. Do we have my slides though? There we go. Don't you love it when it works? Thank you for having me, and I'm here to present a United States view of some of the issues you're talking about. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I thank you for your time today. In the United States, we began our journey on research integrity issues, particularly related to public trust in the late 1970s, when there were a series of United States research scandals that caught attention. This caused the United States Congress to hold hearings about the integrity of science. And the very first hearing in 1981 was opened by a then very obscure congressman from a small district in Tennessee named Al Gore. And he opened the hearings with a statement that has recurred over and over in all of the United States discussions about research integrity. And it talks about the base of the investment. And the United States government, like many governments, makes a very large investment in research. And it talks about the trust in the scientific enterprise. And if that trust is threatened, then not only are the people placed at potential risk, but the welfare of science itself is undermined. And so the public trust theme has been present from the very beginning in the United States through all of our discussions about these issues. The center that I am involved with at the University of Illinois, the National Center for Principled Leadership and Research Ethics, creates tools, resources, and programs, and we focus on leaders, lab members, lab leaders, university leaders, chairs, departments, heads, deans, and we focus on measuring environments. Our foundational principle from which we operate in our center is that excellence is more than about what you do. It also encompasses how the work is done. So it's not enough to be first or to be fastest or to be best. How you do it, and particularly in university, what kind of educational environment we're creating, is central to whether you have a culture of excellence or not. So we define the cornerstones as rigor and the research, reproducibility, inclusion, and integrity of the research. And that leads us to our understanding, our foundational understanding, that people and structures interact to create and maintain cultures of excellence. And so today I'd like to talk about three elements of institutional integrity. One of them is individual skills, because all of us bring something to the table and influence those around us all the time. The other is the research environments that we collectively create in the environment in them. And the third is what it takes to earn and retain public trust. The other elements here, there are many other elements. I'm just simply seeking to focus on these three today to share some thoughts with you about them. I will say the first two are not controversial. The third, my thoughts on this have evolved a great deal since the 1980s, and they are entirely idiosyncratic personal views. Most of my colleagues in the United States disagree with them, just so you know, in the interests of full disclosure. Everything always starts with the fact that this is a human endeavor, and we are all fallible, and we are all susceptible to what over the course of my career I have come to think of as the career tragedies: temptation, rationalization, ambition, group and authority pressure, entitlement, deception of ourselves and others, incrementalism, embarrassment, and stupid systems. The article I wrote about this that talks about them as pitfalls of research misconduct was narrowed by the editors because I actually think these are the human pitfalls that we face at work. We are all susceptible to these tragedies, and I'm sure that they feel familiar to all of us. So when you think about the individual skills, first we have to know and be responsible for ourselves, be responsible for our own responses to situations. We're now involved in a very large collaboration with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which is the largest private funder of biomedical research in the United States outside the government. And we are developing a long-term, long-form professional development program aimed for lab members and lab leaders. It's focused at the unit of the laboratory. And after doing an enormous number of focus groups and interactions with individuals in labs across the country, we framed this as better science via leadership development. So we're trying to impart tools and perspectives to be able to deal with colleagues, peers, and trainees directly, constructively, appropriately, fairly, and inclusively. Because the place that a lot of the research integrity problems develop is at the human level, feeling pressured, feeling that you're going to cut a corner, feeling that you need to succeed, feeling that you need to win. And so we start with leadership development as the program, as opposed to we're here to teach you responsible conduct of research, because we want to meet the audience where it is and offer something that is what the audience is seeking, as opposed to what we want to impart about here's how we want you to do research. So we provide what we say are relentlessly practical tools. We work on what does it take to build trusting relationships, making effective and ethical decisions that match individual values and individual career aspirations, having difficult conversations to solve problems, and growing from mistakes or missteps. This program is rooted in an evidence-based approach, so it's based on, I'm going to show you a clip of a feature film that we made that's the core of the curriculum. It's set in real lab environments showing nuanced situations. A lot of the tick the box one and done situations that our students and trainees encounter involve situations where they think, I would never do that. Who would do that? As opposed to, oh, I don't, maybe. So our program is focused in the evidence saying that to support intrinsic motivation, it provides relatable lab content. To increase retention, it has an engaging story rooted in real-world scenarios. And because we're interested in transformative change, not just ticking the box, it provides concepts, then reflection, and opportunities for practice. I'm going to go to this one.
This is Anna Sophia. She starts today.
Yeah, I remember. Welcome.
I'm honestly surprised to see you here.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be gone by now. There have been issues.
What's wrong?
I got a different molecule again. I've run through this twice on my own, and I just can't get it.
It could be something off in the notes or the route.
No.
Darren, talk to me about the delays with the Sorensen people.
I think I moved pretty quick, considering the complexity. The rest of it's Harold.
He's been nothing but capable before this. Maybe he doesn't have the hands I thought he did.
And now I have to go over there and deal with Darren. He's a piece of work. What's the point of making the molecule if we can't prove the efficacy of it on the bio side?
The data I'm getting from the last batch of compound is totally inconsistent.
Not being able to reproduce is usually a bio issue. My advice would be to keep doing the experiment until you figure out what you're doing wrong.
Did he do something?
It was almost like he was coming on to me, and his comments made me really uncomfortable.
So he hit on you. He probably hit on all the girl students at the conference. Just hope he remembers your name.
Hi, Jules. Can I talk to you about something?
Is everything all right?
I've been having trouble reproducing Justin's work. It's hard to interpret his lab notes on the server. Maybe if you help me figure out the system, I can take it from there.
You're going to be taking over making the compound for the Sorensen people.
Really? That's what Harold is working on.
Is all of that your mail?
I'm sorry?
We were just trying to be safe. We just hadn't seen you before. Wanted to make sure you were in the right place.
Are you sure you're okay?
It's not worth getting into.
Come on, Jaina, what's going on?
It's kinda everything, you know?
I've been texting you all day. Are you okay?
Not really.
Have you eaten today?
I'm just not hungry. I haven't been sleeping very well. I'm just tired of being tired.
You can't let this whole thing get to you like this.
What, being a failure? I keep messing things up. And you know Heidelberg, there's no margin for error, there's no room for mistakes.
I don't feel like I have control over my work right now, and it's having a serious impact on my future.
Look, you're going to be running your own lab soon, and you're going to be dealing with situations like this, and you won't have anyone to call in.
I really want my thesis work to build off of what you've been doing with the Heidelberg lab.
It's really not a great time. You coming in would just be another variable that I can't take a risk on right now.
It's okay. I understand.
Everything okay? I'm wondering what more I could have done to help keep things on track for some of these students.
Oops. Now we have to see if we can get back into the presentation. I'm screen sharing. Worked again. All right. So this is a feature film that the program is built around. It features a troubled collaboration between two labs. There's an individual component that lab members pursue independently. So it's divided into episodes. Each episode has a scene, some interviews and information, and then it has some professional development activities that people pursue alone. Then periodically, the film is divided into 3 acts. So often the labs get together at the end of each act, and they talk about the content, about the episodes, and the skills involved. We have just finished a very large pilot with 250 people and 15 labs. And we are now refining the program based on what we learned during the pilot. We are finding that labs are having useful conversations with each other about their values, about why they do things, and improving their communication, particularly around conflicts, and that students are feeling more efficacy in seeking assistance when they're feeling pressured or don't know what to do, which is really what we want when people are encountering ethical dilemmas. We want them to seek help before they dig the hole that they can't then get out of. So that's a segment of the piece that we're doing on individual skills. One of the things about the environments in which we all work and how we interact in those environments is the pressures that they create on us. The film shows a little bit about what happens to one of the characters when he feels a failure because he can't reproduce the molecule that he's been assigned to do. This is consistent with information that we learned in focus groups and reinforced by the 2020 Wellcome Trust survey of over 4,000 researchers that found that 61% felt pressured by their supervisor to produce a particular result, and 13%, which is a pretty large percentage, wouldn't feel comfortable approaching their supervisor if they couldn't reproduce lab results. So what we've tried to do is take real dilemmas, put them in a setting where then they're discussable, approachable. People can have a little bit of distance because it happened, in the movie, and they can talk about what the characters could or should have done, and thus gives people an opening to talk about things that sometimes aren't discussed enough. Those environments where people feel pressured or don't know what to do are the environments that we end up having to deal with in universities and in research institutes. And so thinking about the environments, if we care about the quality of the environments, and one of the things we talk about in the United States is that in the United States, degrees at universities are granted in the name of the university, and in the name of the department, they are not granted in the name of the research supervisor or mentor. And so we as institutions and departments take responsibility and should take responsibility for the quality of the experience. And if we care about it, we should assess it, and we should use that evidence to shape actions and policies. This is not my area. We are a collaborative group. I have learned everything about the terminology about organizational culture and organizational climate from my colleague Brian Martinson. So if I get this wrong, it's his fault because he didn't teach it well. Organizational culture are the things that how we do it here. Organizational climate are the observable and therefore reportable aspects of organizational life, the policies, the practices, the procedures, the norms. And working with Brian and his colleagues and with funding from the Sloan Foundation, we have 2 surveys that we use for organizational research integrity and the quality of the research environment. These are not employee satisfaction or engagement surveys. They're not, are you happy working here? What they are is measuring perceptible perceptions, perspectives of reportable dimensions. Both of these have been validated with large samples, and they correlate with people's self-reported acts. So the Survey of Organizational Research Integrity Climate looks at a number of elements in a lab, and the Work Interpersonal Cares Survey looks at psychological safety, hostility, abuse of power, conflict resolution, and sexual harassment. What is it like to work here, and do people feel safe asking for help? Do people feel, are they thriving here? So we think that you should measure environments in order to take action institutionally. The third piece of this is the one that I warned you is controversial, that not everybody in the United States, in fact, almost everybody disagrees with. And it has to do with the understanding that it's very difficult to solve a problem. If you ask the wrong question, you will often get the wrong answer. And so in research integrity elements, it is easy, for the reasons of the career tragedies, to ask the wrong questions when a problem arises. How will this affect our reputation if it becomes known? How could anyone think Alex would do such a thing? We don't have to report this, do we? Why would you want to cause problems for your own project? Is something that a lot of whistleblowers have reported to me that they have heard. Those are wrong questions, and they set us on the wrong path for research integrity. Better questions, and ones that I have found effective from working with research integrity investigation panels, is to help people reset at the beginning. Do you want your name and reputation associated with an institution where dishonest work is countenanced? Are there other scholars depending on this work? What kind of education are students getting at our institution? And if you recenter in the mission and values of why our universities, these great institutions, exist, we are more likely to get to better answers when we encounter problems. Public questions, back to this issue of what does it take to earn and retain public trust? Because the public, when they read about research misconduct, are asking, does this affect my treatment or my mother's cancer treatment? Why are we funding these people with our tax dollars? And can we trust any of them? If you think about how trust is earned, because trust is earned, not given, and how it's retained, it has to do with accountability, it has to do with transparency, and it has to do fundamentally with our institutional integrity. My personal belief is that we must find a way across the United States, across Europe, around the globe, to give more credibility and more rigor to our investigation standards and processes. So with Ivan Aransky and Adam Marcus from Retraction Watch, we have put together, with a working group, a peer review form that we think would be helpful for looking at the rigor of research integrity reports. It's publicly available on our website, as well as not paywalled on the JAMA website. Thank you. I think that it's worth thinking about that if we believe research should be peer reviewed, why is our work, when we are making the most serious decisions about whether work is credible and has integrity, why are we not also participating in peer review? Finally, after many decades of working in this area, I have come to believe that we simply have to make our reports of research misconduct public if we want trust and credibility. I don't know about all the reports in Europe because I've read very few of them. I have read a lot of reports in the United States, and they are by and large not as strong as any of us would like. There are public reports from the Netherlands. There are public reports from Japan. I've read some of those. Some of them are well done. And I think that if we are wanting people to continue to fund our endeavor and to trust us, at some point we simply have to show our work and not hide behind confidentiality and privacy. Because we are, in the end of the day, doing work that affects the public welfare and is funded in large part by the public. So those are my 3 points. People and structures must work in concert using mission and values-driven, data-informed actions to foster cultures of excellence, which I think is what we all want. And so when I looked at your wonderful code of conduct, it also has this theme that research integrity is crucial to preserving the trustworthiness of research system and its results. I think we have to think about what it takes to earn and retain to deserve trust. And those are my prescriptions for that.
Thank you very much, Tina. That was really interesting. Does anybody in the audience have questions? Yeah, there's one up there. Sorry. Tamarind. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamarina Hafer from Tilburg University. This was phenomenal. There was something at the beginning you said that really struck me, and I was hoping you could elaborate upon that a little bit more. And it was also about how this beautiful program that you developed with the film and stuff contributed to a form of lifelong learning. Could you give us a little bit more advice on doing that? Because I think it's really, really powerful and it aligns with so much, but how do we do that? And how do we assess that effectively? Thank you.
The Labs That Work for Everyone program, which is the Howard Hughes Medical Institute program we're working on, will be a modular program. Module 1 is the foundational element, and it's what we call long-form professional development. It's intended to be done over a period of months because human beings, adult human beings, learn and build habits slowly. And so what we do is start with the values and career aspirations of people. So the very first module, the very first episode starts with, why are you doing this? Why are you a scientist? What do you care about? What are your values? What are you trying to achieve? And then do your actions and your skills support your values and your aspirations? And the issue has to do with the responsibility of each of us to build and grow the skills to manage our own careers. So while, of course, the educational institution should be supporting and nurturing and educating, individually, each of us are responsible for our own actions. So we try to start with the individual, also recognizing the generational issues, because I'm old by now. The students and the generations we are dealing with today have a different outlook and are no longer willing to accept a lot of the treatment that we did coming up through our careers. And so we're starting with a very egocentric, what do you care about? How do we serve your goals? And try to demonstrate that developing skills intentionally and thoughtfully can get you where you want to go. And we're hoping that that builds over time, and we'll present additional modules of skill-based items. So one of the short courses, the first module is intended to be consumed over several months. Some of the short courses that will build onto that, the long-form first module is intended to be done by a lab every 3 or 4 years as the lab turns over. But in between, there'll be shorter pieces. One of them is about giving and receiving feedback, for example, which is something that, in general, we're pretty terrible at. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Anybody else got a question in the audience? Sorry, I'm a bit blinded here. Is there anybody on the online participants that have a question? Okay. All right, doesn't look like it. Okay, thank you very much, Tina. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, so our second speaker in this session, oh, fantastic. So Dr. Heinz Fehrenbach is from the University of Lübeck, and obviously he's online. So you're very welcome, Heinz. And I will hand over to you.
So welcome and my greetings to Paris. I'm sorry that I cannot join you physically, but I hope you understand me and everything will also technically work. I will try to share my screen now. So can I work with the clicks or?
Yes, you should be able to change slide on your side.
How can I do that?
If you click on your screen, you have two arrows. Okay, you moved it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry for that. So I'm professor in retirement, and I'm now working as a freelance systemic personal and business coach, as my disclaimer, and I'm also serving on a voluntary basis as a member of the Network Against Abuse of Power in Science, which we established in 2021. However, the ideas presented to you today reflect my personal view and are not necessarily shared by people linked to me. So, we have heard a lot about the written norms of research integrity, and they greatly developed until today. And yesterday, the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity was presented, which has includes the many principles which are very well evolved and address all the different aspects of research, that we have many different actors, a lot of collaborations are involved. It's crucial to preserve trustworthiness, as we've already heard in the talk before, and there's also a basic responsibility of the research community, so each and every one of us. And in the next step, so we have two further aspects. So there's a summary of behaviors which members of our scientific community are expected to act. And there's a summary of research behaviors that members of our scientific community must refrain from. So it's all about expectations of behavior that are somehow also linked to the membership in our community. And the question now is, do we need to expand current concepts of research integrity? And apparently, yes, as we are meeting here for this Congress. And there are, for example, additional examples such as the Code of Conduct of the German Research Foundation, GFR, or in German DFG. So in 2019, they published new guidelines for safeguarding good research practices, and under Guideline 4, they made a point for the responsibility of the heads of research work units, which was not included in the guidelines before. So the head of the research unit is responsible for the entire unit. And specifically, researchers, they are responsible, they and also the leadership of the institution are responsible to deliver measures to prevent the abuse of power and the exploitation of dependent relationships. So in an online comment to this guidelines, there's stated that the abuse of power in academia is not commonplace, but it does happen. So this was very important because before, abuse of power in academia was not really accepted, officially accepted to happen. This was a great step forward, although GRF says it's not commonplace. So, and I asked the question, are excellent guidelines enough? And for that, we should look from the expectations to the factual behaviors. So in the guidelines, we have formulated what we expect, but we have to look what people in fact do. So in 2019, the PhD networks of the three big research organizations in Germany, Helmholtz, Max Planck, and Leibniz, performed a survey which included more than 4,700 PhD students, which were 31 to 51% of the respondents. And in the results, you can see that 10 to roughly 13% of the respondents experienced bullying from the superior. And unfortunately, only 5 to 6% of these people reported the conflict. And from these 5 to 6%, a third was dissatisfied with conflict management, 20% neither nor, and only 20 to 40% were satisfied with conflict management. If you look into the prevalence of asthma in Europe, which is about approximately 10%, like that, and we see that asthma is considered to be a widespread disease, we must state that the abuse of power in academia is commonplace. So another survey, the data of which I would like to point out is the data from the EU consortium UNICEF, in which 46 university organizations in 15 countries in Europe participated, and over 42,000 people responded. And their data show that nearly 2 in 3, more than 60% of the respondents have experienced gender-based violence. And even 1 in 3 respondents have experienced sexual harassment. And like the PhD students, there's a low reporting of gender-based violence incidents with only 13% who reported it. And again, I would say the abuse of power in academia is commonplace. So academia indeed is navigating towards an iceberg called abuse of power, at least in my view. And the question is, do we need more or more detailed maps? So the good news is, from my point of view, sometimes you can prevent something if you name it and if you understand it. And to understand it, let's have a look into how organizations work. And this is my layman's view with a few insights from systems theory, based on the work of the German sociologist Niklas Luhmann. And here, so we have already heard a lot about culture yesterday and also today. And this is a system theories perspective. So there are different perspectives, but I like this one very much, and you may at the end understand why. So it's structure versus culture. Let's have a look at this park. It's somewhere in Berlin. So, and if you look, you can see here, there are ways, so pathways, there are park benches, for example, and this is what I would call structure. So it's the university or the research organization, organizational chart, SOPs, codes of conduct, because someone, so the administration of the city decided to build the pathway here. It decided to set the park bench there. And the decision premises to those citizens using the park is that they walk and ride a bicycle on this pathway and they sit down there. So, and this was decided upon maybe even under participation of the citizenship. And then you go, so this is, let's say, a formality. Everything runs on automatically if the people do what there is presumed they should do. And then, yeah, there are people sitting here on the lawn, and then you can see this pathway. This was definitely not built. And this is under the aspect, so nobody decided to build here a pathway. So this is the undecided decision premises. So at some time, so after repetitive walking through this pathway appeared, and sometimes it's okay to use it. But no one decided, at least not in the administration of the city. And that's what system theory calls the organizational culture. All that is not decided upon and happens, and people are acting like that. Maybe over there is a metro station, and it's much faster to go right across the park. And this is the area of informality, and it provides even these spaces for deviations from the decided structure. So to bring it in a more abstract form again. So all these decided and undecided decision premises span up the scope for the de facto behavior. It's all about the expectations and not yet on the de facto actions. And I would like, so especially for research organization, this button strategy, it's part of the structure because it was decided by the leadership of an institute. What is the purpose of the institute? What are the goals? What are the priorities if you look at the different goals? And the point is that with the different goals, you will never be able to hit all goals right through the bullseye. So because they are only in this fictional cartoon really aligned like that. So most of the goals are not very well aligned. If you look at publication grant record as a goal, supporting your early career researchers is maybe a goal, higher education is a goal, there are different other goals. And this area, so conflicting goals, they are the area where the space for bypassing behaviors is created. And now I would like to come from the theoretical aspect to a more practical view into the things. So this is everyday life, an example of everyday life. It's a fictional example, but I would say from my work in the network against abuse of power in science, a very realistic one. The issue is that the PhD in the team developed an innovative new project. The PI and head of the team suggested to send it to a funding agency to secure funds for a postdoc position for him. Due to a forthcoming evaluation of the institute, the PI suggests that he himself should act as applicant to increase the chances. After approval of the application, the postdoc position was filled with someone else. So hence, the PhD sends a complaint to the ombudsperson, and the ombudsperson invites for this round table. So the technician in the team was not invited. If we now look into the single participants, the PI, he is on tenure track. The grant is needed to get a permanent position, but he is a collaborator of the head of the evaluation committee of the institute. The PhD is on a 2-year contract. The extension depends on the evaluation by the PI. The residence permit of the PhD depends on the contract. The ombudsperson is on permanent employment. He's the ex-supervisor of the PI. The head of the institute is also on permanent employment. Grants of the PI are important for the forthcoming evaluation of the institute, which gives him more prestige. The postdoc in the team is on temporary employment. He asked the PI to write a letter of recommendation for the postdoc position in the US. So what will happen if the single people are made the statements on the round table? The PI argues that the PhD got substantial input by himself, so it's okay how everything run. So the postdoc, although he finds the PI's behavior was not okay, remains silent. The head of the institute states that he or she shall not intervene. This is a process of research misconduct, and the leadership should not comment on it. The ombudsperson argues in the end, overall, the PI's decisions secure benefit to all on a long run. So the file is closed. Everyone is reminded that everything is confidential and nothing should leave the room. So another look from a different perspective, a psychologist's perspective on this bypassing behavior, and I can really recommend the reference I've given here below from the Journal of Business Ethics. So it's on a different field. So from financial fraud, there's also sometimes fraud to appear. And in this chart here, the potential decisions are shown. So the first step is, am I aware that the behavior I'm doing is fraud? So if I say yes, so it's I use my intuition to feel whether it's acceptable or not. In the end, if I commit fraud, the next step is I rationalize the fraud. And this may come up to that I commit or continue committing fraud while upholding my moral values. And I would like to share some thoughts that Jennifer Crocker, a psychologist, social psychologist, wrote in a comment in Nature 2011 in view of the fraud of Dietrich Stapel. And she argued that every minor transgression creates a threat to self-image. And the perpetrators, they rationalize and justify their way out until their behavior feels comfortable and right. And this makes the next transgression seem not only easier, but even morally correct. So you slowly but surely step up the stairs. And if you go back to the park, so this says, the more often such bypassing behavior is reproduced and tolerated, so the tolerance by all of us around the one who does this bypassing behavior, the more firmly it will establish and is even in the end recognized as normal, and no one will question it anymore. And if we go briefly back to organizational culture and system theory, the biggest problem regarding formal structure, in my view, is that when the formal structure is shaped by legitimacy requirements, so if the institute feels that the pressure from the public is so great that it must do something, so then these legitimacy requirements lead to decoupling through the formation of informal expectations that are often incompatible with the formal structure. So one example may be I'm from biomedical science. So if you do animal experiments, they need really a long time. It can be easily that the people have to stay in the lab for 12 hours. And so then at the next day, so they should have a break of at least, I guess, 10 or 12 hours to come into the lab again. So the institute will not sanction any people who do not comply with this really legal rule to have such a break. Instead, people are maybe get the advice to creatively document their working times. So just as one aspect, so how even incompatible behavior can be accepted in an organization. And at this point, however, the efficiency of the formal structure ceases. So structure, so the words of the conducts and the factual behavior are not congruent anymore. So, and you lose authenticity.
3 minutes, Heinz.
Yes, I'm through almost. So what was lacking in my view? So in this example, respect, responsibility, and reliability, and finally, and most importantly, in my view, a completely independent referee. And the question also whom to address when initiating change processes. So this was an ORI report from 2004 looking into which academic ranks were involved in research misconduct. And as you can see, misconduct covers the whole academic range from top to bottom. And students had been the least status group involved. So as you have already heard, so the answer would be all people should be involved in, that are involved in scientific projects projects should be involved in such change management initiatives. And Schromm already reported on this model, the Borsel model on good scientific practice, where all people were involved. So in my view is that we develop from this more individual running race to a more team-like rafting race in research. And the biggest challenge is to establish an environment which fosters living research integrity principles as integral element with respect, reliability, and responsibility. And this is a task for the scientific community that is for each one of us. And with this, I thank you for your attention and your time. And I'm sorry for the delay in the beginning with the technical issues.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for that lovely presentation. Are there any questions from the audience? Any questions from anyone online? Okay. I actually have one quick question for you, Heinz.
Yep.
You talk about the normalizing, that these behaviors become normalized. At that point, what can you do?
That's difficult to say. So the earlier you intervene, the earlier someone says this is not okay, the higher is the chance that this pathway doesn't establish as a pathway everyone can go.
Okay, thank you very much. So just one last, okay. So listen, thank you to both of our speakers. I think this was a really thought-provoking session. And I hope that you'll sort of take away some of the messages and cogitate upon them over tea, coffee, wine this evening, whatever. So thank you very much to both my speakers.